With Kyler Murray named QB1, expectations are on the ceiling for the Minnesota Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. Today's episode is brought to you by KALSHI. For a limited time, download the KALSHI app and use code Locked On to get $10 when you trade $10. Today on the show, so now that the dust has settled a little bit, everybody's released their like clearly pre-written pieces about, okay, Kyler Murray's the guy. Here's Matt Freese had one that apparently he wrote way back like months ago. There was like 10,000 words on Kyler Murray and an evaluation of him and how he fits in Kevin O'Connell's offense and all this. It's over at Wide Left. Go read it. It's great. A couple, if you're the kind of person that like covers scheme, you're going to have something that, because it's this fascinating mix. And actually, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today, as well as just how different the expectations are for the Vikings now, how that's affected national perception, or even if it's affected national perception. Maybe I'm overthinking this. And how Kevin O'Connell can unlock the most out of Kyler Murray, which was the subject of a Ty Dunn long form that was this big, glowy puff piece on what the Viking, or puff piece for Ty Dunn standards. He always is going to be a little more balanced about that kind of thing. But it was this very positively slanted piece about the Vikings and Kyler Murray and how it can work, and how the Vikings could potentially be the answer for his flaws, and how Kyler Murray could be the answer for the Vikings. And look at this match, right? And that is worth discussing a little bit. So that's going to be the show. But first, the positivity around the Vikings exploded in the last 2 days. Everybody says now that it's Kyler Murray, it's almost like everybody got reminded that it was Kyler Murray. Because when he first signed with the Vikings, everyone kind of went, oh, that's kind of interesting, right? That's an interesting match with what Kevin O'Connell does and how Kyler Murray plays, and how's that going to work? And then the second thought you have is, whoa, that probably means not great things for J.J. McCarthy. What's that going to be? And then you hear it's going to be a competition. Everybody scoffs. And then it is a competition. Everybody scoffs more. And now the competition's over. Only that first thought is left. Now there's no J.J. McCarthy on it anymore. He's going to be there. He was asked about everything. He said, all right, I'm going to be the backup. I'm going to do everything I can. He said all the right things. And he probably fades away into the distance now for a little while. And so now that you're just thinking about the Vikings as the Kyler Murray team, you go back to that fascinating conversation about how this very improvisational kind of type B quarterback is going to work inside a very type A offense. Not to mention the under center versus shotgun, or the over the middle versus the to the outside thing, or any of those other kind of points that were made back in March when Kyler got signed, and we all kind of had to piece together how we felt about that fit. And it's really easy this time of year, which is the most positive time of year for every team. Everyone's team's got a chance at, maybe 10 games, compete for the division, maybe a wild card. Everybody's going to tell you that right now. All the way from, the top echelon teams and the Rams and the Chiefs that are like, we're Super Bowl teams, and all the way down to the Browns and the Jets and the Cardinals are all going to tell you, well, they don't know that Jacoby Brissett. You're going to hear that about everybody. And there have been very stinky Vikings teams. And I've come on here and done the exact same thing. It's August. It's what it is. I don't begrudge anybody for it. But in that kind of, that's what the weather is outside right now. So when we're talking in that weather, in that super homer positivity weather, the good answer to this question about how Kyler Murray and Kevin O'Connell will mix is pretty gosh darn cool. Because Kevin O'Connell is the guy that knows how to extract the most out of a quarterback. Maybe he can't do it with a young guy. Maybe we were wrong about that. Maybe we shouldn't call him a developer of QBs. But he's the guy that can get the most out of somebody that is, can understand what a guy is good at and bad at and put him in that right position. And that's supposed to be the thing. I have my skepticisms on it. But nationally, that's the reputation. And mix that reputation with undeniable athletic talent and all the cool eye-popping plays. And, hey, remember that Hail Murray a few years ago? What if that guy comes back? Wait, this could be something. He's got Justin Jefferson. Hold on. He's got bookend tackles. Wait, we might have something. What's his defense like? Oh, it's the Brian Flores thing. Hold on. And you start to go crazy. You got anonymous sources coming out and saying the Vikings need to be a playoff team. They're 10 wins. This is their deal. You have people going on TV and talking about how they can use pistol, and that's going to be this really cool under center versus shotgun solution. We've got this kind of dissonance there. The solution could be pistol. I don't mean Kimes did a big thing on ESPN about that. And for what it's worth, I agree with her, but it's so easy to get wrapped up in all this stuff, and the expectations increase quite a bit. Here's the interesting thing. The expectations for the Vikings, if you looked at my favorite proxy, I guess, for national perception, is going to be the betting markets or the prediction markets, if you prefer. I think both of those are going to kind of show what people are looking at. And what's interesting is if they ever diverge, I don't really know what to attribute that to yet because the prediction markets are too new, but maybe that'll be an interesting thing to think about later. But point being, the prediction markets and the betting and FanDuel and KALSHI, right, have basically placed the Vikings as a fringe playoff team the entire offseason. And they moved up a little bit with just a little extra hype. There's just more people paying attention, but not much, right? So the Vikings are plus 450 still to win the North. They're still the dead last team to win the North. So that positivity hasn't moved up. But the Lions, Packers, and Bears all beat each other up in this, by the way. The Lions are plus 150, the Packers are plus 260, and the Bears are plus 340. So the betting market doesn't have a lot of certainty on who is going to win the North, but the Vikings are their least favorite option. They were going in 2024 as well, for whatever that's worth to you. And in terms of the prediction markets, well, the Vikings have been mostly an 8 or 9 win team by virtue of something like KALSHI. So if you want to use that as a proxy for public opinion, and I don't know which public and whose opinion we're talking about, depending on what you're looking at, right? The opinion of people who like to partake in these kinds of things. That has put the Vikings in this kind of 9-ish win place, I would say. And it's just that all the other NFC North teams have a lot of hype around them, and they're all supposed to be big contenders, and the Vikings just aren't quite there. That's why they're last on FanDuel. In fact, I don't even know where they are on the prediction markets. I'll look that up real quick. But point being, last on this too at 18%. So they're supposed to be last in the division, but that's more to do with the NFC North being crazy. But that hasn't gone with the media frenzy that we've seen. Hasn't led to the bump that I expected. Which is what I thought this was going to be. I thought I was going to look it up and be like, oh my God, look at how much it's changed. Remember when, the Vikings were plus 500, now they're plus 300 is this big thing. They got up to plus 450. They've been trading at 65% to win more than 8 games. They're at 63 right now. It's gone down. And so those prediction markets, when you think about it, when you're the kind of person that is going to put money into this, you're going to probably think, okay, it's probably Kyler Murray, right? As you're making your prediction about the Vikings, you think about them in context of Kyler Murray. And I think in a more casual sense, when you're not really trying to think through this and put a parlay together, you're going to think, a month ago, almost as the average between what you would expect from the two quarterbacks. And one, you're going to have a different expectation than the other. That's what it's always been, that Kyler Murray's expectation's been much higher than J.J. McCarthy's. And so now that we're only on that higher thing, everybody suddenly upgrades their expectations for Kyler Murray when they're the kind of people that go on mics and talk about it, like me. And I can even speak from a little bit of experience just thinking about other QB competitions that I've covered on Locked On NFL, where I'm talking about teams that I don't immerse myself in and day out. And, you're at a little bit more of a distance there. Like when I talk about the Falcons on that show, and they come up a lot because they're a very interesting team right now. And you kind of think, well, it's either Tua or it's Penix. And, whatever the middle of those two guys is kind of what you proxy in for what kind of quarterback play you're going to get. But really, I should be thinking about the Falcons as the Tua Tagovailoa team until Michael Penix is back and healthy and we find out what's up with that. But that's probably not going to happen for a while. So at least for the immediate future, Tua is going to be the starter there just by necessity. And so that's going to be what it is. So put whatever your Tua expectations are on the Falcons and then move on accordingly, whether you're excited about that or you think he's trash. So point is, a lot of people are coming in and talking about how much the expectations have risen. But when it comes to dare I call them the silent majority, it feels like they already were thinking about it this way. And not a lot has changed. which, feeds into the perception we've been kind of dealing with all offseason that Kyler Murray was going to win this quarterback battle, and the idea of a J.J. McCarthy-led Vikings was not something we were going to put into our parlay. Anyways, kind of a weird point, but there's been a lot of very clearly pre-written puff pieces about Kevin O'Connell and Kyler Murray and how this could mean a renaissance and a bounce-back year for the Vikings, who were so disappointing last year, and this is going to be what Justin Jefferson needs. They all make sure to go out of their way and make sure the wide receiver is satisfied, even though he's never really showed that he's the kind of guy that needs to be placated. But I guess he's the star of the team, so they go out of it. So they all the pieces go out of their way to mention that. And one of those pieces, the Ty Dunn one, and a lot of what I have seen, has mentioned Kyler Murray as a potential comeback player of the year. There's one guy kind of in the way of that, and I would like to engage that discussion next on Locked On Vikings.
Matt Derry here from the Locked On Lions podcast. Life insurance is one of those things you don't really think about until you have a reason to. For me, it really hit home when my father passed away over 20 years ago. You start thinking less about yourself and more about the people who depend on you and making sure they're taken care of no matter what. That's why I like Ethos. They make getting life insurance simple. It's 100% online, no doctor visits, no needles, none of that. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in just a few minutes, and even get same-day coverage. And honestly, that's huge because life gets busy. You can get up to $3 million in coverage, and some plans are as low as just $30 a month. It's just one of those things that gives you peace of mind knowing your family is protected. Take 10 minutes to get covered today with life insurance through Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Applications may vary. Rates may vary.
This episode is also brought to you by KALSHI. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making their prediction between who wins the division and who makes the playoffs, who's lifting the trophy at season's end, and on KALSHI, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. For example, the Vikings being 18%, trading at 18% to win the NFC North means that if they do win, if you put $100 on that, you would get $525 if they actually won the division. On KALSHI, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house, and as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. Trade the draft, pick the game, and more on KALSHI. Download the KALSHI app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade. $10. KALSHI. KALSHI, trade on anything. 18 plus only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. KALSHI products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Real quick, hey, I'm on short form social media stuff now. So I'm on TikTok, Instagram. There's a YouTube Shorts account, all by the name Luke Braun NFL. Go check it out. So one of these major optimism things that is happening with the Vikings right now, one of these hype train deals, is Kyler Murray as comeback player of the year. And obviously that's a really difficult one. That's another one. I'm going to look that up on the markets here, live as I go. But it's got to be Patrick Mahomes, right? Okay, so he's about twice as likely by KALSHI to win that than Kyler Murray. And then I'll check it on FanDuel as well. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes plus 185, Kyler Murray plus 550, tied with Jaden Daniels. So everybody's bringing that up as a possibility. I kind of think a lot of people are just genuinely forgetting that Patrick Mahomes would also count. They're just seeing a guy that is going to come back from an injury and from the Cardinals madness and all that, and they're just going to come back. So I think it's going to be Mahomes. But let's entertain the debate of that for a second, because Patrick Mahomes is coming off an injury, right? And what the comeback player of the year award is for is pretty much that. And it was actually even redefined to be kind of explicitly that you were coming back from an absence, from some kind of adversity, and not from badness. There have been comeback player of the year winners in the past who have had a bad season, and just not been very good, and then kind of come back from something of their own accord, or worse, come back from like a suspension, right? Like if Deshaun Watson had a crazy season and he was an MVP candidate and he was as big, you know, he had his renaissance as a comeback player of the year candidate, that would be a bit controversial and a different interpretation of the rules. Really, it's for exactly Patrick Mahomes' situation. He tore up his knee. He's going to be back, maybe not even for the beginning of the year. I actually have no idea how that's going. I haven't talked about the Chiefs in a long time on Locked On NFL, so I haven't had a reason to look it up. So I don't know. Chiefs fans, let me know how that's going and if he's going to play week one. But otherwise, it's Justin Fields over there, right? And that's going to be, I guess, whatever will happen there will happen there. But let me entertain this for a second. Let's be irresponsible August optimists. What if Patrick Mahomes doesn't come back from that? I mean, he tore 2 ligaments, right? ACL and LCL, if I'm not mistaken. What if he doesn't come back the same? Or doesn't come back the same maybe this year? That would not be unprecedented. Guys come back from the knee injury. They're still gaining strength. It's time for to play the season. You're not the same athlete you were before. And headed into that ACL, LCL tear last season, the Chiefs were kind of struggling. It was a bit of a down year for Mahomes. Now, I don't think anybody blamed that on Mahomes. I think it was more other like structural issues with the Chiefs that maybe they've gone and tried to address. But what if they didn't address it? Teams try to address things all the time and it doesn't work out, right? Whatever your free agent, your draft pick, your whatever, it doesn't work. And so if the Chiefs aren't suddenly the powerhouse that they were for nearly a decade, not to mention a tough AFC North, right? Chargers and Broncos, both playoff teams last year. Number 1 overall pick in Vegas. I don't think they're going to have a great shot at the division, but that's 2 tough games potentially against, you know, maybe a team with a little bit more youth on it that you don't know as much about or something like that, right? Like division could be weird. But really, it's the Chargers and Broncos, different teams there. So I'm just thinking through the Chiefs. And what if that doesn't happen? Then suddenly Kyler Murray becomes like the next best guy, probably, unless you want to throw Jaden Daniels' hat in the ring. And you think of the comeback story that would be told. It'd be very similar to Sam Darnold's. And all of the puff pieces, including the Ty Dunn one that I'm going to get to, make that comparison. They talk about Kyler Murray as this almost this victim of Arizona and all of the chaos and turmoil that was going there. And Marvin Harrison didn't work out. Look at all these draft blunders they made where they traded down and they let Will Anderson slip through their fingers and they let Malik Neighbors slip through their fingers and they get Fs in the reports, recards all the time. And, you know, all these things that you constantly make fun of the Cardinals for. And Kyler Murray was just doing his best to keep it all together through all this chaos. He goes to Minnesota. And the reputation of Minnesota is as this, like, it's the good place. It's this, like, clean and sparkling, wonderful place where only great things happen. If I can take off the August optimist hat, I feel like that reputation was earned with how cool their facility is. But in terms of the actual on-field results, the Vikings have one of the longer playoff win droughts in the league right now. They have had a lot of struggles, and they've had backup quarterbacks, but so have other teams that have managed to find a way to be more successful in spite of that, right? The wheels didn't totally fall off of those teams when they had to, you know, deal with a backup quarterback for a little while. And I think I could levy more critiques. I'm not going to do that too much, but I could levy more critiques about the Vikings in terms of propping them up as like the adult. You know, as finally a serious organization. Are we sure they're that serious? They don't even know how to find a center who can snap. Like, are we sure they're that serious? So I'm skeptical of that. But that's the perception still of Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. And of course, Kevin O'Connell still has the perception of this is where you go to revive your career, to have your Dobbs sanity, to have your Sam Darnold renaissance. This is where you go to do that. Now Kyler Murray gets to go, you know, jump on the elevator, and he is going to go up. And so if Patrick Mahomes is out of the way for whatever reason, maybe he misses more time, right? Maybe he misses half the season. Hard to be comeback player of the year with that. If for whatever reason you remove him from the equation then the argument gets so easy to make, and you pretty much just have to argue him against Jaden Daniels, who is coming back from a little bit of being injury plagued, but mostly coming back from suck. And that's just not as good of an argument of, oh, you had a down year and now you're back to normal. That doesn't feel like the comeback player of the year who's, back in all of our good graces and all that. It would be Kyler Murray. But usually it's for the guy that tears his ACL and then has a good season afterwards. And when that's a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who's the greatest out there right now, it's going to be pretty hard to argue with. But all of this is moot if Kyler Murray doesn't have a good year. If he struggles, we're not having any of these kind of conversations. And we're going to look back on this August stuff and be like, look how silly everyone was being. They thought this would work out. Well, how can you get this to work out? That is the part of the Ty Dunne thing that I found the most fascinating, that I would love to share what I think about it with you next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. Not only sports games, but concerts, comedy shows, festivals, whatever. The hard part is not figuring out what you want to go do. It's getting the tickets to go there. Between long wait times, confusing checkouts, surprise fees, buying tickets is a nightmare. And it doesn't have to be. That's why so many fans are turning to Gametime. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. So if you want to get to, say, the Vikings home opener, last I looked on Gametime, you could get in the door for 2 tickets for $200 a pop on Gametime, and that includes all fees, checkout taxes, service fees, whatever is all included in that price. You get it up front and a panoramic view of your seats. You can make sure that you are satisfied. No Buffalo Bills situations. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. This episode is also brought to you by Indeed. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific skills, certifications, location. So less time gets spent searching, wading through the muck, and more time gets spent actually finding the right person and going through the interview process of that. Finding quality hires on Indeed is easy. In the minute that I'm talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. And you know how important it is to find that person, get them onboarded, and do that quickly and efficiently. The hiring process is expensive, and you surely don't want to screw it up and have to go back to the beginning, do it again, and incur all those costs again. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. With less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. So I've been teasing it all day, but this Ty Dunne piece over at Go Long TD, go check it out. I'll link this is part 2 that I'm going to talk about. I'll link that in the show notes. But of course, if you want to read part 1, it's about Arizona. It's about JJ McCarthy flaming out. But I talked about it yesterday. The JJ McCarthy part of it wasn't very new. If you've been following day to day the Vikings during the season, it's like the gritty into the end zone and the towel over the hand thing in the last game of the season. It's all stuff that was discussed before. But we move on, right? So now it's about Kyler Murray and the idea of him as this hyper athlete that for whatever reason has never put together the elite play he was supposed to when he went first overall. In a weird way, Caleb Williams is evoked in this one because Ty Dunne also has this really big thing on the pairing between Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams and sort of this hit piece almost on Matt Eberflus and what was going on before and Ryan Pace. And then the idea Ben Johnson's going to come in and, take everybody out behind the woodshed and instill discipline and it's all going to work out. And then they win the division after that, right? So he's kind of comparing this similar thing. But instead of coaches changing in Chicago in the same team, it's the quarterback going from one team that works one way to another team that works another way. And the idea of part of why Kyler Murray in Arizona didn't work out, aside from just the Cardinals suck and it's going to drag everybody down of it all, but rather like the reason this wasn't like a pairing is maybe one of the most fascinating things to me was this idea of Kyler Murray's personality as a guy who doesn't want you to blow smoke. He doesn't want you to coddle him and to sugarcoat things. And with quarterbacks, it's this thing that you hear about sometimes that happens, that guys will you don't want to mess with the quarterback's head, right? You don't want to upset his emotional state. And because it's such a mental thing, it's almost like you don't talk to the kicker if you're not supposed to talk to the kicker. Don't get in the kicker's head, right? And so people will kind of walk on eggshells sometimes around quarterbacks, especially a guy like Kyler, who's the franchise, right? He's the 1-1. He's the dude. He's the face of everything, this larger than life figure. And unless you're specifically tasked with being the guy, and sometimes even if you are specifically tasked with being the quarterback guy, you walk on eggshells a little bit. And Kyler hates that. He doesn't respond to that. He needs to be challenged. He's one of these guys that needs to be coached hard. And that wasn't there in Arizona. Jonathan Gannon was not that guy. That's just not his personality. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for Jonathan Gannon, but it was a bad fit with Kyler Murray. Cliff Kingsbury had a much different rapport with him, so that obviously worked out differently, which it was imported to Arizona, and that developed in a totally different place when he was much younger. And there's some quotes from Kurt Warner and Warren Moon, these old Hall of Fame guys that had their kind of renaissances later in their career, right? Kurt Warner had this big thing in Arizona, ironically. Warren Moon in Minnesota had his kind of retirement tour that went pretty well, made the playoffs. And so they're kind of well qualified to talk about this sort of thing. You were really synonymous with one organization, and now here you are in a new one trying to kind of restart the clock. And they talk about and they both know Kyler Murray, right? Because of media or just being a quarterback. And they talk about him as this guy that was a little more immature when he was in his early 20s. How about that? Maybe that happens. And now he's, in his late 20s, and he's been humbled and he's learned a lot more. And is that going to be different? And then it goes into, that's not Kevin O'Connell's personality. He is not the guy that's going to lay into you. He is a force of positivity, was the way that the Go Long TD article described Kevin O'Connell. And I find that really interesting. And I actually can't help but compare it to the way Brian Flores and Tua Tagovailoa fell out, and how Brian Flores represented the total opposite end of that spectrum, where he just lays into this guy all the time and he says stuff about him on the podium that's not so flattering, and there's this whole drama, right? It's I wonder if that's, I don't know, maybe an interesting thing if we end up looking for that, if we, if the season goes belly up and we're talking about other stuff, talking about getting rid of the coaches and interim head coach Brian Flores. If we're in that hell, maybe that becomes a point that we want to dig back up. I don't know, something to plant a seed in your mind for months or potentially years from now. But the Vikings aren't that team. That's not my perception of their team. And I felt as though Ty Dunn kind of danced around that in his thing, kind of said, well, these guys are more about being organized and being on schedule and everything being kind of structured. And that's not how Kyler Murray thinks at all. And so the idea is that Kevin O'Connell, to get the most out of Kyler Murray, is going to have to make some changes to the way that he approaches quarterback play, or that he has approached quarterback play with all the other guys that he's coached. These are PhD offenses. There are sight adjusts. There are things at the line. Everything has a bunch of little levers. It's like flying an airplane, right? You got to know what every little button is for and what to do with it, and when to deploy these ideas. And you have to have the whole memory, the whole manual memorized, and a bunch of checklists memorized. And you have to have all this prior knowledge before you can do the thing. And then once you do that, you can kind of do it easy street, right? Once you are a trained pilot with enough hours, you can absolutely go fly that plane and without too much trouble, which is the whole point of getting all those hours, right? Because you don't want your pilot ever having a problem that they can't solve, that they don't already have a procedure for. And so that's how you get a guy like Brock Purdy in this system that isn't necessarily the most physically talented guy, but hey, the ball comes out on time when it's supposed to, and you do the thing, and you manage the game. Or Jimmy Garoppolo was like that for many years for the Niners, right? And it goes to the Super Bowl. That's how you get a Jimmy Garoppolo to the Super Bowl. And these guys don't do, this was Kurt Warner's point. These guys don't do well with quarterbacks that don't stick to the plan. Read A, read B, read C, whether that's a peer progression from guy to guy to guy or reading defenders or whatever. When you don't stay in that, when you don't color inside the lines, O'Connell wants to essentially be able to like Madden user all 11 players. And if he does that, this thing's going to work on the whiteboard. So if you get a guy that likes to go outside the lines as much as Kyler Murray, you create a friction. And so O'Connell has to figure out that friction. That is an answerable question. I think there's a whole bunch of ways that you can facilitate and even engage Kyler Murray's improvisational desire, right? The Ty Dunn piece recommended a lot of rollouts and, you know, going under center, which he's not necessarily used to as much. I mean, he does it fine. It's fine. It's just not what his offenses have done in the past. But then getting the pocket moving, right? Do a rollout, you know, become a play action team, go back to the Kubiak, Kirk Cousins days and go be that. You got to be able to do it modern style because you run that too much and edge rushers start to key on it and come straight up field. But you're also the guy that can maybe dodge that and maybe make that a little more forgiving and you can throw on the run. And that's the thing. I don't want to give Kyler Murray too much credit for his throwing on the run. It's been actually pretty poor lately. So you have to find that balance there. But that's one thing, right? Hey, let's get motion involved here. Let's get like horizontal movement somewhere in this, stress the defense, and put Kyler Murray in an ever-developing situation where he can just like think about it faster. The other way is to just give him a lot more leeway to work in outer space, to just do stuff. And instead of having a flow chart with a bunch of different multiple choice answers on it, just say, hey, if you see something, do it. If you think you can get the guy to do it, and give him just the space to do it. Say, let's just try this because you're Kyler Murray. You're kind of the guy that does this, and let's just embrace that. And I kind of think that if this works out really well and Kyler Murray's comeback player of the year and he's in the Pro Bowl and stuff, and we go back to this conversation, I kind of think that's going to be my most likely explanation for why, which is that Kevin O'Connell said, we got a guy that loves to think on the fly, make changes on the fly, and do this. I should just give him options to work with and let him cook. So maybe I've got on the sidebar, if you're listening on audio, I have on the sidebar, this bullet point is titled How Kevin O'Connell Can Unlock the Most Out of Kyler Murray. And how Kevin O'Connell can unlock the most out of Kyler Murray might just be let him cook. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.